I would imagine, Rich, for yourself, the engineering mind comes into play when you talk about putting together those questions or thinking about how to address these challenges across the changing landscape of higher ed. So I think that's an important mindset to have. You think about all those ways you're going to think through the problems and find the solutions. It's got to bleed into your approach to leading NACAS.
Yeah. The changing landscape is pretty obvious in higher education. Higher education has needed to change for decades, and it operates on a glacial pace. The time frame for higher education is, a semester. Yeah. If you need to change something, you can maybe change it for the next semester, but it might be the academic year. Yeah. So, we can't change it this academic year, we'll do it next academic year. But then your planning comes into play. Usually it's a 5-year strategic plan. Sure. Maybe it's a 15-year master plan that you're working with. So that time frame is just very, very different from most of the rest of the world. And there are times that kind of when your hand is forced, right, to make change. It could be motivational. It could be inspirational. It could really kind of push for some of these changes to happen. Absolutely hate to hear about campus closures. Sure. And we hear about those more and more often. It used to be that it was kind of only the for-profit campuses that would close. You'd hear about those. A lot of nonprofit campuses are closing. Yeah. And again, very, very tough decisions for campuses to make and painful for a lot of people. But it's probably needed. The number of universities competing for a declining enrollment base, at some point something has to give if you just look at the balance of how many people are looking for an in-person, on-campus education versus how many universities we have. There are just not enough students to go around looking to the future. So change is imminent, and change is certainly happening.
And I would imagine that brings a sense of urgency to some conversations, to your earlier point, that usually take time to have that implemented. Well,
is the sky falling? Yeah. Maybe the sky is falling in some cases. But
today it's not. When you think about partnerships, you mentioned that earlier, and all the different ways that collaboration comes into higher ed and how a university functions, how you think through all these challenges and find solutions. What do you see as strengthening partnerships across the lens of NACAS, and how you can use partnerships to help provide resources to your members?
Well, the first thing and probably the main thing is that we have 200 business partners, and our business partners are subject matter experts. They're thought leaders within the higher education industry. When I first got involved in NACAS, that was 30 plus years ago, I think our theme was connections that count. Mm-hmm. And NACAS was involved in making the connections that count. And that's true. So connecting a business partner who provides an important product or service with auxiliary operations who need help. Yep. And
you're that matchmaker.
Yeah, kind of a matchmaker. And we're actually seeing that business partners are recognizing that higher education's in a tough spot. Yeah. We talked about this during the COVID pandemic, but never let a good crisis go to waste. Sure. So we're seeing record numbers in terms of how many business partners want to be in our expo, for example.
That's outstanding.
At the conference, because they know that higher education needs help, and they want to raise their hand and say, hey, we can help. Yeah. But also just kind of the other level of engagement with business partners is on the educational side. Presenting webinars and just talking with institutional members at conferences and other face-to-face events, and sharing stories about, hey, we ran into something like that, something similar to that, what you're facing on another campus, and here's someone you could talk to if you want to dig further. I think often about our face-to-face experiences, and there's a lot of therapy in those conversations, right? There's a lot of sharing difficult stories, but also there's so much learning that happens, and it's creating that point of contact to where you already dealt with something that's on the horizon for me. Yeah. So now I have someone to connect with in the future, and that could be another institutional member or a business partner.
We see that so often in the professional associations. I'm always thankful for the person that had to go first, because then it's a learning opportunity. Their success story is already there. But that's one of the things I love about NACAS is hearing people talk about things that they're experiencing across the board. At NACAS East, one of the cool conversations that I got to be part of was, and I think this started with COVID, having to feed students that they couldn't come into dining halls, they couldn't be together. And it speaks to the climate change, where they literally get to check out almost like Tupperware registered to them. And I heard I would have never thought of that. That was not my experience on campus, but students actually having their own set that they return it after they eat and it gets through. So they're just grabbing food to go as part of their meal plan. And like multiple people talking about that from different campuses, and then other people interested in it. And I was like, this is one of the coolest things. But again, catastrophe led to some really cool innovation.
Well, 10 years ago, no one thought that you could ever do a to-go program from an all-you-care-to-eat dining operation. But so many people are doing it now.
Here we are.
Yeah, it's just an evolution. Yeah. But COVID, I think, changed the mindset for a lot of those things.
It's the trigger.
And triggers are very important. But, I just want to reiterate the fact that a lot of people are kind of raising their hand saying, I need help.
Yeah.
Right? And I need help, and I need to find someone who could help me through this. But also a lot of people are raising their hand and saying, everything is so complex. I need someone to just help simplify.
Yeah.
Can you make the process simpler? Can you help me understand how to hit an easy button, if there is an easy button? Where is that easy button that I can hit just so this can be done and go away? Mm-hmm. Because you just don't have time to deal with the complexity of some of these situations. When I was on campus, I always felt that there was a huge cost with governance.
Yeah.
Right? Just having to follow all these steps and processes and rules, and making sure that you're not breaking a law or breaking a policy, and there are 3 or 4 different policies that you have to look at. You have to look at a campus, or maybe a board of governors policy, or even a state administrative policy.
Yeah.
If you're on a state sponsored campus.
Sure.
But complex lives are really struggling to find simple solutions to their challenges.
Yeah, that's an incredible, line to think back on, is the complex nature of things and just making it easy. And I think that's where NACAS tries to position itself, is that resource to be the easy button, to be that community of professionals that have addressed different high pressure situations, and you have that resource available to you.
Yeah, and I mentioned the AI tool. We just launched a little AI assistant on our website called Auxie, AUXIE.
I love that.
Yeah, I thought it was so neat.
But again, people just don't have time to navigate a website. Yeah. They just want to go to a spot, ask a quick question, get a quick answer.
Yeah.
And also knowing that sometimes people they're working into the wee hours.
Yeah.
And they can't just email somebody or just call somebody. So
yeah, that's another thing that has really changed. And I think some people have always kept non-traditional hours, but I find it more and more true. And then especially for us, because we're serving the campus from the East Coast to the West Coast. So we have folks that are up before us, and we have people that are up way later than us. Even in Hawaii, we work with Hawaii campuses and things. Yeah. And so when you think about that, like our hours are not traditional anymore, but is there somebody going to be there to answer the question? So being able to tap into AI, we have a chat feature, all of those cool things. I think that's the way we're going. I don't see everything going back to just a 9 to 5, because if you really think about it, in our country as a whole, it was never a 9 to 5. It just depended on where you were living at the time.
Yes. For yourself, Rich, you think back on your own experiences, been involved in plenty of high pressure situations. If you think back to, the 90s with Georgia Tech hosting the Olympic Village, you're involved in the front lines of getting that all executed. What lessons have you learned from other, high pressure situations that you think about that guide your leadership today, that you find yourself in conversations with folks as they start their own auxiliary services journey?
Yeah, the Olympics was a great learning experience. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and one lesson I learned is after you do it once, you never want to do it again. Olympic planning was tough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was a decision made in the early 90s for a massive event that happened in 96, but just to give you the scale of impact, so the campus went from 4,200 beds in housing to 8,500 beds.
Oh, wow.
In about 4.5 years, and from zero to completion in that time frame. So it was crazy. It was crazy planning. There were weeks where I would have 20 to 30 hours of Olympic planning meetings on top of the normal schedule.
Yeah.
So it was pretty high pressure. I've heard students say this about their college experience, that really bright students will come out and say, great experience, learned a lot. The faculty made it so much harder than it really needed to be. And they would struggle to find a reason why. Mm-hmm. Why did it have to be that hard? And I found that to be true with some experiences like the Olympics. But one thing I'll say is follow the money.
Yeah.
Usually if you follow the money, you find out why the experience seems tougher than it really should be. Because you think about, okay, we have all this capital construction to get done. Let's jump on it. Let's get moving. Let's get rolling. Let's make decisions. Let's make it happen. But there was hesitancy to make decisions or to pull the trigger. And it turned out it was not a hesitancy to pull the trigger, but it was a hesitancy to release the funds. Because fundraising had to happen to support all the capital construction that happened on the Georgia Tech campus.
And is that where auxiliary services would partner with maybe advancement or something like that to do that fundraising?
Well, in this case, for the Olympics, it was an international fundraising effort. And the two key leaders for the Olympics were both in the banking industry. So they actually didn't want to release any money until the very last possible second so they could earn as much interest as possible. But
complexity.
Yes.
Yeah. So sometimes things just feel so much more complex and become so much more challenging. Because you don't really understand why.
Yeah.
If you understood why, you would say, okay, forget it. We're not going to think about that until there's an opportunity to release some funding to make it happen. But the scale was incredible.
I can imagine.
So essentially, the entire campus was relocated off campus for about 3 months. 8 miles of razor wire fence put around the campus, 11,000 military officers assigned to secure the campus to make it the Olympic Village. Apparently, it was the most secure place on earth during the '96 Summer Games. And the level they used the entire campus leased out to the Olympic movement to house 15,000 athletes, coaches, and trainers. 80,000 square foot dining tent serving 1,200 meals every 10 minutes. I mean, just these massive operations.
And I would imagine those meals are large meals for athletes that are burning calories at the rate that they are.
They're probably eating 4,000 calories a day.
Yeah.
And plus the security piece. So nothing could easily be delivered to campus. So there are a lot of products that had to be staged before the Olympics even started.
Wow.
But crazy times. A lot of folks continue to do it, though. So some folks are involved in '96. They stayed with the Olympic movement.
Yeah.
But it did become very stressful, and stress happens, and conflicts happen at every level.
Yeah.
So I was brought in to help facilitate a conversation with the highest level of planners for that '96 Olympic movement, because things were getting heated, and the pressure was on, and everybody was starting to kind of buckle under the pressure. So we had this collaboration meeting where we all came together to say, okay, let's remember why we're doing this. Let's remember the processes we put into place for how we're going to get it done. Let's remember our roles and responsibilities. And let's understand that collegial collaboration is going to be critical to success. Yeah. And so sometimes it does get to that point where you have to bring everyone together and remember.
Circle the wagons.
It's kind of like higher education.
Yeah.
Sometimes higher education leaders need opportunities to kind of bring their mind back to why does that campus exist? I think auxiliaries plays a role in that. I talk to auxiliary leaders about how often do you get your top campus leaders into your facilities? How often do you get them into a dining hall? How often do you get them into a bookstore?
Yeah.
And maybe even if you have to kind of fabricate reasons. We're doing a grand opening of a new graduation store or commencement store in our books. Find reasons to get them into those spaces, because then they can take a breath and get away from all the political turmoil and all the other issues they're having to deal with, and kind of enjoy the reason that the campus exists. Enjoy the reason that auxiliaries exist, to enhance the quality of campus life for students, to make it a great place to kind of live, learn, work, and play, and kind of all the great taglines that colleges like to have.
There's just a few.
So they can see all the important stuff,
Yeah.
But no, I think campus leaders appreciate that.
Yeah.
But they need to be kind of drug away from their desk because they're not going to really have time to do that on their own and do it naturally. Some will.
Yeah.
But many just don't have that opportunity.
Now, campus leaders start their journey somewhere. And for those folks that are just getting their journey started in auxiliary services, what would be your sage advice for them to pay attention to now for the years to come?
Well, first off, just know that change will always happen.
Yeah. It's inevitable.
It is. But also auxiliaries, maybe even especially auxiliaries and higher education, we tend to be protective and maybe overly protective of certain things.
Yeah.
You think about funding.
Sure.
It's hard for auxiliaries not to be protective of the money that they work very, very hard to generate. Auxiliaries, they don't get tuition funding, typically. They don't get tuition funding. They don't get state funding. They don't get federal funding. They operate based on the revenue they generate. So if you're operating transportation, you have to buy new buses. You have to stay within your means. Mm-hmm. And you have to save money so that when you need to buy new buses, you can buy them. So there's a level of kind of protectionism for their funding. I think of it as planning.
Sure.
There's long-term planning where you need to know how much money you need in the future to replace and refresh. But auxiliaries needs to be willing to give away money too.
Yeah.
They need to be a part of the strategy of the university. They need to understand the importance of enrollment and affordability. Mm-hmm. At UNC Charlotte, that was a big concern. Meal plan rates were kind of targeted by student government. They said, look, meal plan rates are high. What are you going to do to justify? We need more of this, more of that. So we re-engineered meal plans, and we were able to reduce the cost of meal plans by 10%.
And is that where you work with your partners on your vendor side to come up with that solution?
We have to work with our dining partner there to come up with how do we do this?
Yeah.
How do we find solutions? But at the same time, we were trying to add more value, add the kind of value that students were looking for in that meal plan program. But there are ways to do it. It's not always simple. Sometimes you're giving away a little bit of money in order to do that. But same thing with housing operations. A lot of housing operations who have apartments, they say, well, it's market rate apartments, it needs to be market rate charges, but that's not really the way parents and students look at it. They think, I'm on campus. It's a state university. It shouldn't cost as much as it would cost if I lived off campus. But those are real struggles because the same kind of cost factors, you still have to pay the power bill and the water bill and have the grass cut around the facility and the trash. And so you have all the same expenses as the market rate apartment off campus might have. But the expectation is that you should charge less.
Right.
Being understanding of what the leaders are concerned about, those big issues, those strategic issues that they're faced with every day, and finding ways for, if you're a leader in auxiliary services or if you're a line worker in auxiliary services, everybody plays a role in helping the campus leadership meet those strategic objectives.
I was recently at a campus visit and was meeting with a client partner, and their role, which was newly appointed, was to focus on everyone's perception that was working there. And it didn't matter if it was a faculty member, a housekeeping, parking, across the board, it was to focus on their mentality when they were at their job. Because the belief was, if you are happy, excited to be here, then our ultimate goal, which is our students, their students were just their goal. Then when our students approach you with a need, a concern, a question, then they will experience an enthusiastic person, someone that's enjoying their job. And I heard that, it resonated because coming from the business auxiliary side on campus, that was our single goal, was to make our customers, our students, our faculty, our staff understand and value what we were doing for them and appreciate the services that we brought. So I love that a campus had created a position that was to ensure across the board their employees were content, at the very least, with what they were doing in the resolution, that it would impact their students positively. And I kind of always think that that's what we're all here for.
Well, I'm sure you've heard of this, but chief happiness officers with corporations. And
No, but I want to apply.
I have heard of this.
Yeah. But
That's a job.
I've always thought that the goal in auxiliaries or any service industries, you hire happy people who are competent enough to learn the skills that they need to do the tasks. Yep. But if you don't start off with a happy person, it's a struggle for them to effectively serve campus customers.
Yeah.
But you're right, it makes a huge difference. That's, to me, the critical starting point.
Yes.
So that attitude and mindset, when you look at any position, you got to have that right, though, in order to go serve others.
Or it's like, I'm going to send you to a training course so you can learn to be happy.
Yeah.
How do you teach happy?
Yeah, I know.
I would love that.
Can't do it.
You cannot do that. When you think about your role, Rich, as CEO, you're not just maintaining NACAS, you're shaping it for the future. What do you hope is your legacy that people remember from your time in this role?
So I hope people look at NACAS and they're proud. Yeah. So if they're involved in NACAS as a volunteer, I hope that they're proud to be involved with NACAS because of kind of the intent of what we do, to help auxiliary professionals be more successful, to grow in their careers, to understand their environment more effectively, but with the bottom line of ensuring that students are successful and that their institutions are successful. So there is a kind of a business result in the end, but the process is really kind of what's important. Again, innovation is important to me, and I hope that they see NACAS as an association that is always reinventing itself, always offering a new something, a new wow. For the members, and that NACAS would be their go-to place if they need help. They would think first of, let me check on with NACAS. Let me check on the website. Let me see what they have. But we hear it so often. I'll go to a conference and bump into someone and say, hey, it's my first conference. I just picked up auxiliaries, or I just picked up dining. I just haven't done it before. I really need some help. Well, that's what NACAS has really excelled at. And it's because of the programs we offer, but it's primarily because of the people who come together. I look at our situation today. You hear about a lot of universities who are having to cut staff, cut costs, significant budget challenges. And it's a tough time, to pay the cost to send people to a conference. But also it's probably the most critical time. It's like the time where you can't afford to not go get help. Yeah. And I hate to hear when people say, cut the travel budget. I'm thinking, well, you're in a situation where you need a lot of help. Your campus is struggling. And auxiliaries can help resolve a lot of those concerns and challenges. But I hope people see it as a truly indispensable resource. Yeah. Even though budgets are tight, we got to find the money to send people to these opportunities because they'll come back with great ideas, with great solutions, with tangible efforts that they can immediately apply and implement. Hopefully that will be the legacy.
I love that. And I think at the heart of it all, you've got relationships amongst peers trying to provide that conduit to a solution. And I love that that's your mindset for the legacy, is to position NACAS as that resource, that trusted resource, to have your back in these conversations as you navigate them on your specific campus. And every conversation, every campus is different challenges, but to have that vital resource readily available that when you need it, it's there for you. I love that.
Can't live without it.
No.
Would be what I would hope people would say about NACAS.
For yourself, Rich, we'll have a final question here for you. You think about the things that wake you up in the morning, are your drive, what inspires you to continue doing what you've been doing now for 37 years? What makes you tick, and what's that fire that wakes you up every day?
Having seen the work that auxiliary folks do every day on so many college campuses and the challenges that I know they face every day, I just can't help but want to support those folks. The people. The people in auxiliary services are what makes it happen, and they need great supervisors, they need great managers, they need great business partners. They need long-term solutions, short-term solutions, and there's a lot to do, and there's a big need, and there's a lot of people who need it.
Yeah.
And so, I see it as a huge opportunity, and that just energizes me. Yeah, I like big challenges. I liked the Olympics, even though I wouldn't do it again.
Yeah.
Not that this is an Olympic level challenge, but there are some big issues.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do in my role is I study the industry. I study higher education. I try to know what's happening, and then I try to interpret. Will it have an impact? Could it have an impact? Is there a tangential impact?
Yeah.
That, okay, maybe we don't see it right now.
Yeah.
But college campuses are ecosystems. If one thing changes over here, it could potentially impact a lot of other things that are happening on campus. And so try to predict, having had 37 years on campuses, it does help me kind of anticipate what impacts might result from changes and things that are happening within higher education and state government, federal government, policy, other governance issues. So.
Very wise words. I think it's you think about all the things that go into waking you up and driving you, and having the opportunity to form a career that allows that to enable solutions for folks. It's incredible. And I think that at the end of the day, you have to have that alignment in order to have the reward in what you're doing and the fulfillment in the position that you find yourself in. Outstanding, Rich.
Great. So, as I said before, 37 years, never woke up in the morning dreading going to work. Year and a half at NACAS, haven't gotten up in the morning dreading.
There we go.
Work. But it's exciting, and the people that we're supporting, they deserve the kind of support that NACAS is trying to offer.
Yeah, it's incredible, Rich. Well, we appreciate you coming in today. This has been an outstanding discussion. For our listeners out there that might be in the auxiliary services realm, check out NACAS. They got your back and are here as a trusted resource. With that being said, Rich, thank you for coming in. We've been in the club.
Thank you so much. Appreciate Club Colors and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Anytime.